Thanks for coming out tonight. This is the second of 9 planned town hall meetings where we're going to discuss the proposed referendum, the process, and the projects that are currently planned for inclusion. Hopefully everybody had a chance to check out some of the boards. I know we got here late with some of our other exhibits in the back, our show and tell items. As I move through, I'm going to talk about some of the more frequent questions that we get, and then I'll provide an overview of the projects, or rather Tim Fulaski will, that we're proposing to include in the referendum. And then after that, we'll move into a financial review with Dave Del Grande of why debt makes sense for these projects and how that will fit in with our current debt obligations. And then we'll finish up with a question and answer session, like Jen said. This is who will be presenting tonight. Myself, the acting city manager. Normally I'm the public works director. Dave Del Grande, he's our finance director. Tim Fulaski, he's the acting director of public works and water resources. And Joe Spadafino, who's our parks director. Tonight you'll hear Tim, Dave, and I refer to the term capital in reference to spending and budgeting. So before I started, I wanted to provide the definition. Our city charter defines capital as, this is a mouthful, any project or equipment, including any extension or addition thereto or thereof, having a life expectancy in excess of or to be financed over a period greater than 6 years or a value exceeding $20,000. That's great, but what are some examples of capital? For us, capital projects are usually things like what we have listed here, infrastructure. The large majority of our capital spending is going to be on an item like these, mainly because they're very expensive. We have a lot of them, and like your house or car, they need to be maintained or replaced periodically. So how much infrastructure do we have? A lot. I'm going to walk through each of our utilities, because they're where we have most of our infrastructure, and give a quick overview so you can have an idea of the scale. We have the most water infrastructure by a large margin, and most of these items are quite expensive. For example, it costs around $1.2 million to replace a mile of small diameter water main like what's in front of your house, 6 or 8 inch diameter. We have up to 36 inch in our system. In total, the replacement value of our water infrastructure, if we wanted to replace it all today, is around $200 million. And that's about $6,000 of water infrastructure alone for every resident of the city. We also have a lot of sewer infrastructure. Sewer is a little less expensive than water to replace and rehab because it's easier. We don't dig it up generally, we do a relining. If we do need to dig it up, it gets a lot more expensive than water because it runs by gravity and it's very deep. In some places in the city, it's excess of 20 feet deep down to the sewer main. So it's a lot of work to get down and do a repair. Even being less expensive than water, it's still about $67 million to rehab everything we have if we want to do it all right now. Stormwater, our stormwater system's around $100 million. Stormwater is somewhat unique in that we have different pipe materials with dramatically different lifespans, so we track them and handle them totally different. Corrugated metal pipe lasts around 35 to 40 years on average, and we have around 5 miles of it. That's the pipe that's of most concern to us right now, because almost all of it that we have is about to expire or has expired, has holes in it. The bottoms are rotted out, causing sinkholes and some general failures. The rest of our pipe is generally going to be reinforced concrete pipe or high-density polyethylene, like black plastic pipe you might see around places. And that has a lifespan of about 100 years. In total, we have, in addition to our pipes, we have 65 city-maintained stormwater facilities, the ponds that are in residential neighborhoods that we take care of and maintain into the future. We estimate the replacement value of our stormwater infrastructure to be about $100 million. The electric infrastructure is made up of substations, lines, and transformers, our McKee's solar facility, off Cleveland Avenue, and we estimate the value of that to be at least $50 million. I'll admit that's going to be our least accurate estimate. It will likely be some number higher than that, but we wanted to be conservative when we were going through everything. In addition to our traditional utilities, we also have parking infrastructure consisting of our downtown parking lots and meters. That's all handled as part of our parking fund, which is treated in Newark much in the same way as a traditional enterprise utility like water, sewer, electric. So the money that we make off the parking fund comes in and is handled in a separate accounting method from taxes. So it's not intermingled, and then we make a known transfer amount out based off our financial policies. Lastly, we have our general fund infrastructure, which includes city-maintained streets, city hall, the police station, our parks, and other city-maintained facilities. This is the infrastructure that's supported by the taxes you pay, the fees you pay for a building permit, and the margin transfers, the profit that we kind of take off the top of our utilities, which is about 20% of our utility revenue gets transferred into the general fund. In total, we estimate the current replacement value of our infrastructure and capital assets at around $500 million. That's a huge number considering we're a city of only around 33,000 people. That means we have about $15,000 or more of infrastructure for every resident in the city. The vast majority of it is underground or at least out of sight and out of mind. So it's easy to forget about until you hit a pothole with your car or your toilet won't flush or your lights go out. While it's helpful to know how much of everything we have, it's even better to know what condition it's in so we can plan for how to handle it. So what is the condition of our infrastructure? I'm going to walk through each type in the same order that I already did. So you'll be able to see that we have different levels of information on each fund because different areas are easier or harder to get information. Starting with water, I'm going to focus on mains first because they make up the majority of the value of the water system's assets. Getting good condition assessment on water mains is difficult because they're under pressure and have to remain in service during the assessment. We've begun piloting some technologies that will indirectly measure the remaining pipe life, but widespread implementation is still in development. In the meantime, we use a combination of our main break history, water quality complaints. If you've ever turned on your sink and had orange water come out or pulled your whites out of the laundry and they're orange, that's what we track that. The pipe age, the pipe material, and industry guidelines to estimate the remaining service life and prioritize our replacement efforts. As I'll show on the next slides, a lot of our water mains are going to hit or exceed their expected lifespan and expire in the near future. It's important to point out that expiring doesn't mean the pipe will stop working, though. I'll get into that a little more shortly. This diagram is what we like to refer to as the bathtub diagram, and it shows the general failure pattern for pipes and other types of infrastructure. You often get a quick round of failures or issues as any of the manufacturing defects and installation issues kind of fail early. Then you get a nice long constant failure rate where you might get a break every decade or 2 decades. And then as it expires, you'll see it ramp up and the failure rate accelerates pretty rapidly. With water mains, this is most often due to corrosion. About 75% of our main breaks are estimated to be directly as a result of corrosion. The expected life varies depending on the material and the manufacturing methodology. The longer the life of the material, the longer that long constant failure rate phase. This is where it gets a little weird though. Generally, the older the main is, the longer the expected service life, until very recently when we started using advanced laying practices for our water mains. So some of our oldest mains, like the pipe that's in Main Street, were really thick. They didn't have the technology to manufacture a precise thin-walled pipe, so they just made them thick. And they're expected to last 100, 120 years or more. Mains that were installed in the middle of the 20th century have a much shorter life. Ones that don't have a liner on the inside and were made thin because we had the technology to make them thin, they have a lifespan of as low as 55 years, depending on the soil conditions, how corrosive the soil is. And then mains, like I mentioned earlier, that we've been installing since 2016, have a life of back up 100 years or more because we're using advanced laying practices. We're wrapping the pipe in almost like a plastic sock to keep the soil off the pipe, and it reduces the corrosion. This slide gets into what I mentioned earlier about how a pipe expires. The green line is the cost to operate the existing pipe. As you can see, the cost increases with time as the pipe gets older and begins to fail more frequently. At a certain point, the cost to operate that existing pipe is the same as the debt service would be to replace the pipe. So think of your mortgage. You buy your mortgage, and your mortgage payment's $1,500 a month. So at a certain point, replacing the house, the mortgage would be cheaper than repairing it. Determining the value where that point, that crossover, is very difficult. We can get a defined cost for doing main break repairs. Every time we get a pipe that fails and we have to dig it up, we estimate it's around $10,000 in cost to dig it up and make the road repair and get the water we waste and the effort that goes into replacing it. There's also a cost associated with the lost revenue from water sales while the water's off, and a cost to our local businesses and our residents for the inconvenience associated with not having water or having orange water that they can't use, and that sort of thing. And some of those other costs are harder to calculate. Let's see. Just this morning, we had a dirty water incident where we had a fire hydrant we had to open up for a test. The Oaklands had dirty water for some hours of time. So the pipe doesn't have to break for us to have issues, and those issues are directly related to the pipe age. Let's see. So right now, we're working to to develop an accurate estimate for the remaining life of the 140 miles of water mains that we have, but it's going to take some time. For the sake of this presentation, we're going to show you information using recommendations from the American Water Works Association, or AWWA, which is to assume an expected life average of 70 years. We feel that based off the areas where we've seen advanced failure rates, this is generally going to be accurate for Newark. So you can kind of see it better. The last time I gave this presentation, this slide didn't come out as well. We also have it in hard copy over here if you want to see it later today. But the red areas, the red pipes that are kind of the downtown in here, those are already past that 70-year life and expired. Orange pipes are this area in here, over here. Those are set to expire in the next 5 years. The yellow lines, which are kind of closer to South Main Street, Elkton Road, and out here on Kirkwood Highway, that's 5 to 10 years. And then the big one is all this, that's that turquoise color. That's all going to go in the next 10 to 15 years will expire, and we'll start to see those increased failure rates. So I'm not sure if everybody has their glasses on, but here we've broken down into 5-year increments when all of our pipes are likely going to expire. You can see that 10 to 15 year window is a big one. The numbers in the bracket itself is the number of miles, and the number just outside is percentages. So you can see about 15 miles of mains are currently expired, which is about 12% of our system. If you look out into over the next 15 years, that number is going to be all the way up to 74 miles. Remind you, it's $1.2 million a mile to replace this stuff. If we continue replacing a mile a year, which is our current target, we'll still have 59 miles of our water system out of 140 that are expired after 15 years. And these numbers here don't count our raw water system, which is a system that carries untreated water. But they're going to be in a similar situation. Based on a recent study by Utah State University, the national average is 16% expired. So we're doing slightly better than average, but that's going to change considerably in the coming years when that wave kind of works its way through. Nationally, it was back in 2012, there was only about 8% expired pipes. So in the last 6 years, the number nationwide has doubled, and the break rate of cast iron pipe, which makes up most of Newark's pipe infrastructure, nationally has increased 46% over those 6 years. So we're seeing a lot of pipes run into that wear out phase where they're starting to break more frequently nationally. Let's see. So what does this mean for Newark? This chart is our break rate, the number of main breaks we've had every year going back to 1977. You can see there's a pretty defined trend there. We did a linear fit line there. So back in 77, we were seeing about 12 breaks per year, and now we're up averaging north of 22. Let's see, each one of these breaks is accompanied by a service outage most of the time, and occasionally a boil water order, which can last 24 to 48 hours. They have a negative impact on the quality of life and if near a business, on revenue. Like I said earlier, the pipes don't stop working, they just stop working well. Moving on from water mains, starting in 2011, the city began increasing water rates from the artificially low rate that was in place prior, which allowed a capital project initiative where we really started ramping up our capital maintenance efforts. While water mains make up the majority of our infrastructure, our other facilities have a much shorter life, so they need to be replaced more often or rehabbed more often, so they punch above their weight from a budget perspective. We've been pretty busy over the last 7 years, and we've completed over $17 million in water fund capital projects. We also have 2 treatment plant projects that are currently underway or we expect to be completed within the next 12 months. The first is replacing our pH adjustment system at our Southwell field water treatment plant to a more effective and lower maintenance system. And the second is to convert from chlorine gas to bulk chlorine system for disinfection at our surface water plant. This would be the same system we have in place at our well field. It's a much safer material and will give us consistency across the plants. We're also planning building envelope and industrial hygiene improvements at the surface water plant and other process changes similar to what's underway currently at Southwell Field. On the sewer side, we've been working to inspect and develop a prioritization for rehab work. So far, we've inspected around 10% of the system and identified over $2 million of high priority repairs. We began making many of the repairs during 2017 and have another project underway this summer. Since 2011, we've spent nearly $4 million on sewer capital projects and have rebuilt all of our sewer pump stations to modern standards. So like I said, sewer runs via gravity downhill. At a certain point, it gets so deep that it's cheaper to build a pump station that lifts it back up, and then it flows back downhill. So we've rebuilt all of our pump stations since 2011. On the stormwater side, we've been, like I mentioned earlier, focused on corrugated metal pipe, which has a much shorter life than concrete, and it's been failing around the city. Starting in 2016, we completed a citywide condition assessment on all the known corrugated metal pipe and prioritized the repairs. In total, we identified $3.4 million in repairs that will need to be completed over the next 10 years. As many of you are likely aware, Council authorized the creation of a stormwater utility, which became effective January 1st of this year. Because of that, we have a stable funding source that's been designed to provide an adequate amount of money to meet our operating expenses and to complete the repairs that have been identified here over the next 5 years. The current rate will not cover the cost of the proposed Rodney project, however. We would need to increase the median residential stormwater bill by a little over $1 a month to do that project that we're going to get into later. On our road network, we have a full pavement management program where we complete an annual inspection of all the roads, give them a rating, and then run those ratings through an optimization program to develop, in an effort to develop an optimal project. If we're to keep our city maintained roads at their current average condition across the city, we'll need to spend around $1.75 million per year on paving alone. We've only been able to achieve that number one time since 2011. In addition, we have about $1.5 million in parks capital maintenance scheduled for the next 5 years, and that's just fixing stuff we already have. That's not new stuff. And I will point out, Main Street's not ours, that's the state, so don't yell at me later about that. So how did we get ourselves into this position? Using only cash, which is how we paid for capital projects up until now, generally speaking, it's limited our ability to tackle large projects because they crowd out the smaller projects. Imagine trying to buy your house cash. You probably wouldn't be able to pay for groceries or anything else that year. And that also crowds out kind of the less sexy replacement projects and preventative maintenance projects. That's a lot more exciting to have a new ribbon cutting than replacing an underground pipe that's generally worked well your entire life. Our water and sewer rates are also entirely consumption-based, so they fluctuate considerably with the weather. This results in a less predictable revenue stream. So we might think, based on past averages, it will bring in $9 million a year for water, and then it will rain all year, and we'll bring in $8 million. Well, that money, we still had to spend a lot of it because it was operating expenses, people, projects that had to happen. So it ends up, some of our capital projects don't happen because we came in under budget on our revenues. In addition to that, nearly half, so 50% of Newark's land is tax exempt. Puts us in a really deep hole when it comes to paying for general fund services like the police. We fill this hole by transferring around 20% of our utility revenue from everything but the stormwater fund into the general fund to pay for general fund expenses. And this is all money that could have been used for infrastructure maintenance. For example, our police service costs around $14 million a year, and we only bring in property taxes about $7. So we're way under with that. So in addition to all that, we're entering the first round of the replacement era on the infrastructure side. Historically, we've not had to pay for most of our infrastructure because it was paid for developers or the federal government through grants. We're now approaching the first replacement cycle for most of our assets, which can really be thought of as liabilities because we don't have a choice to not replace them. Even the mains installed by or for the city were originally assessed directly against the adjoining property owners. Because of this, our tax and rate structure has never had to pay for most of the infrastructure, and our revenue demands are going to increase significantly over the next 20 years as these projects start to fail. All right, so a large majority of Newark has been developed in an unsustainable development pattern, and that's suburban style single family homes. If you live in a single family detached home, I can almost guarantee you're not paying enough to cover the infrastructure necessary to support your house based on our current utility rate structure and our tax levels. For example, if you live in a house with a 100-foot wide lot, your taxes need to support, in addition to police and other general fund expenses, the paving and maintenance of at least 50 feet of your street frontage. That assumes you've got a house across the road and you're splitting that 100 feet with someone else. Same goes for your water, sewer, and electric infrastructure. Using our current costs for water main replacement, 50 feet of water main costs over $11,000 to replace. Assuming 10% of your water bill goes towards infrastructure, which has kind of been our average, it'll take over 300 years for you to pay off that small section of main, let alone the other infrastructure like water treatment plants and booster stations. Fortunately, locations like the downtown and our industrial users are able to offset a lot of the shortcomings of the neighborhood areas, where a house may take over 300 years to pay off their section of a main. A building like 58 East Main, the one down there on the bottom right that has Qdoba in it, will pay off their section in about 2 or 3 years. So the downtown is used to offset the neighborhood areas. So here's a map that's still in development. So it shows whether a property is paying enough in taxes to pay for the general fund services it gets. While it's not complete yet, the general idea and scope is not likely to be significantly different once we get it complete. Based on our preliminary estimates, all the parcels in red do not provide enough in tax revenue to cover the cost of providing them with general fund services. Parcels that have a positive value are shown in yellow, blue, or green, and those are the properties that make up the difference and balance the budget currently. What you can see is that in general, single-family detached homes are negative, which means if we were to approve a new single-family neighborhood today, it will make us poorer as a community, as we'll be taking on more liabilities and revenues. Higher density development like townhomes in downtown and mixed-use projects, on the other hand, will help reduce the need for future tax increases because they pay more than their fair share. I had some people saying, you're telling me I should move out of Newark because I'm costing you money. That's not what I'm saying. And I don't want you to give any side-eyed looks if you live in a townhouse at any of your friends that live in a single-family detached home. I just wanted to make people aware it's a reality. That's where we are today. The first step of addressing a problem is acknowledging you have a problem. Well, this is our problem. This is where we are. It's not going to go away. We're not going to knock down neighborhoods and build anything else, so we have to deal with it. I know the presentation up till now has been a lot of doom and gloom, but it isn't all bad news, and it's definitely not unique to Newark. Cities all across the nation are looking at the same problem, whether they know it yet or not. Fortunately for us, I think we're in a better place than a lot of other cities for several reasons. Firstly, there appears to be a will on council to tackle the problem, which is evidenced by the fact that we're talking about taking on debt and I'm standing in front of you today. We're also a relatively compact city compared to our peers, which means we have less infrastructure per person. Dover, for example, has 2.5 times our land area, yet they only have 10% more people, so they're in a lot worse shape than we are. We're also in the fortunate position of having the Star campus, which will be bringing in all new revenue to the city soon. Each private project that's completed at Star will bring us new tax and utility revenue that we haven't had before in a long time or ever in the case of electric sales. even UD-specific projects will bring in a lot of new utility revenue. The electric demand at build-out is expected to be more than half of our current demand as a city today, the whole city. So we're going to sell a lot of utilities to Star Campus. And all that money will be able to be used to offset some of these future costs for infrastructure replacement. In addition to that, the university is planning to add 4,000 grad students in the next 5 years and 1,500 undergraduates over the next 10 years. Graduate students are year-round young professional residents who live and work in Newark. If we can provide them downtown housing at a density that's productive, we can get all the benefits without most of the problems like traffic and public school impacts that generally accompany new development. So every 1% we add to the tax base is 1% of tax revenue that can go towards supportive infrastructure and doesn't need to come out of your pockets. So at this point, I'm going to bring up Tim, who's our acting Public Works Director, who's going to walk through some of the projects that are pending for inclusion. Before I let him start, I want to point out that all the projects he's about to discuss are already included in the 5-year capital budget and can be found on the city's website on Budget Central. So these aren't projects that are tacked on top of things we were already planning to do. This is what we were planning to do. We're just planning on paying for them a little differently now. So thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tom. Again, I'm Tim Filasky, the acting Public Works and Water Resources Director. And I'm just going to discuss with you a little bit about the projects that Tom mentioned that are proposed for inclusion in the referendum. And I'll get started with water. Water seems to be what we, if you have time after the meeting here, you can look over on the table. There's a couple of our old water mains versus some of our new water mains, and you'll see some of the differences in construction and obviously the differences in quality of the infrastructure. Excuse me. So some of these projects are continuations of projects or programs, we call them, that we've begun here in the city of Newark that we want to continue, that you may have heard at a council meeting or a larger contract. And some are just overdue rehabilitation and upgrades to facilities that provide our water and other services throughout the city. I am going to give you a high-level overview. I'm certainly willing to discuss them afterwards. The boards here have a few pictures of some of the current work that we're doing or the work that we've done in the last few years. But I'm happy to go into detail on any of the projects, afterwards. But I hope to give you a high-level detail here. So the first project here on the board, the Laird Track well field restoration. The Laird Track well field is it's actually a new project for some old wells. So when the Newark Reservoir was brought online, we turned off the wells in the well field so that we could use only creek water to fill the reservoir and to treat and send out to the residents. So the wells were essentially furloughed due to poor taste and odor. Taste and odor is not difficult to treat, but if we can take it out of the creek and not out of the wells, it actually made it easier for us. But the good news about the Laird Track well field is it is completely within the White Clay Creek State Park, so it's completely protected. This isn't something that's subject to an industrial chemical spill or anything like that. These are protected wells, so we can easily treat what is the cause of the taste and odor, and effectively double our drought resiliency by utilizing some of these wells to refill the reservoir when we're on water restrictions in the creek. Many of you may not know, but after a certain level of water in the creek, we actually have to shut our plant off, and that's why we have the reservoir to begin using the reservoir. So in a severe drought, we would have to use the reservoir water, and these wells would be able to refill that reservoir and continue to utilize, and again, essentially double our drought resiliency. So the next one is a long one. Luckily, there's acronyms. That is SCADA, so it's a Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It essentially allows us to be in more than one place at one time. We have one water plant operator that manages all of our water production during 24 hours a day. And we have 2 water plants, several pumps, as Tom mentioned, and booster stations and other complaints and testing and other things that they're charged with doing. if there's a possibility that they could remotely view some of the data, and track real-time levels within our tanks and the production that they're doing, and make changes remotely if they need to. Tom and I from our office can occasionally go on and check what's going on, and if everything's going okay, we can call them and say everything's okay here, you can stay over there, or we can make changes remotely if necessary. So this is an important one. It's actually been in our plan since the early 90s. We're making real progress on it now over the last 2 years. Our Southwell field water treatment plant is positioned on the south side of town, over by the BJ's off of 72. Many of you may know, some of you may not know, the groundwater underneath of the Southwell field was recently listed on the national priorities list with the EPA. That's more commonly known as a Superfund, and that does scare a lot of people. There is contamination in the water. Luckily for us, it is easily treatable, and and the treatment for it is an air stripper, which basically runs air over the water and releases the toxins from the water. So we are able to treat it. We have, we provide fresh, safe water from it, but it is nearing its useful life. So we need to replace that, and at the same time kind of modernize the plant and modernize some of the storage facilities at that site. So our water main rehabilitation, that's an ongoing program. As Tom mentioned, we've spent several $1 million over the last few years replacing the pipe, but we're not at the point where we're replacing that mile or mile and a half a year, that we need to replace to keep up, or at least not get any worse than the situation we're in now. We do need a system-wide study for that, but in the CIP that we're looking at, the CIP cycle that we're looking at now, we have enough information and data to target the worst of what's out there over this 5-year cycle. Tom mentioned the dirty water in the Oaklands this morning. That's actually part of the plan for to design and implement from 2018 into 2019 to replace a couple of the pipes to mitigate some of that dirty water that we get when we have to do routine maintenance and testing on our system. So and then the water tank rehabilitation. We have 5 tanks within our system. These are either the green or the white large stand pipes that you see that keep the water, maintain the system level and pressure, so that when one person turns on their spigot, it doesn't affect the other person that turns on their spigot. We do have 5 of these tanks that are coated in lead-based coatings that we would like to get rid of. We're looking at options right now, whether we need to dry blast them, which would require a DENREC permit at this point, and we're looking at whether we need to actually complete the dry blasting and get rid of the paint, or do we just get rid of the whole tank. Surprisingly, the cost is right now is looking about the same, so we're seriously considering removing some of the tanks and maybe optimizing the system to make, wrong one. To make our system better while we complete some of this maintenance. So on the sewer side, there's really just one project, but the project is several steps in a rehabilitation process for the sanitary sewer system. The first step is to identify the areas where we know the pipe material and the critical nature of the pipe, and perform inspections using closed circuit television or CCTV. These inspections are then reviewed, and the defects in the pipes are prioritized in a report, and this is actually an excerpt from the report. You can't read it, but it basically tells us what the condition is and what the rehabilitation method should be. Again, Tom mentioned sewer lines differ from water lines. They're typically a lot deeper, and we don't actually dig them up. We just line them. So it starts off as a clay pipe. So we put a polyethylene liner inside, it hardens, and there's basically a brand new pipe there that can extend the life for about 50 years. Tom mentioned some numbers earlier about how many repairs we've identified already. We are up to about 15% of the system, and we're looking at roughly $4 million worth of repairs. And about 1 million of these have been completed over the past few years, including one that's going on right now We just did some work on Bellevue Road and McKees Lane. So we will be performing those throughout the next few months, and likely to bring another project later in the year. Excuse me. So hopefully many of you have heard or seen our proposal for purchasing the former Rodney dorms. I was just speaking to a few residents here beforehand. And so our plan is to demolish the buildings and create a stormwater pond and with park amenities. For us, we believe it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the city to acquire a piece of land well situated to help achieve stormwater quality and quantity improvements. The parcel sits at the top of a very large drainage area. So essentially what you're looking at here is on the top side is Forest Lane. The railroad tracks in South Main are on the right-hand side, and Hillside Road is on the left side. So this is in a drainage area that's about 640 acres to 700 acres, so round numbers we'll say 700, which terminates somewhere down in Silverbrook, which is south of Route 4, south of the Chrysler plant or Star Campus. This is actually the top 70 acres, so what drains to this pond, this theoretical pond, would be about 70 acres or about 10% of that drainage area. So we're capturing the beginning of that drainage area and kind of taking that out of the equation to be able to, to open up capacity in the system and kind of treat that water. So what we'd like to think of, we could address both the water quality and water quantity issues, as well as serve as a showcase for educational efforts to show our residents what can be done either close to home, on site, close by, and how they can contribute to keeping our stormwater clean, which ultimately becomes ours and other folks in downstream's drinking water. We estimate about 400,000 people take their water either from the white clay or a combination of the white clay, Christina, and Brandywine. So Tom mentioned the general fund projects earlier. The general fund are things like our streets and our parkland and our maintenance yard, where we store all of our equipment and keep, and we have our garage, which actually maintains all of our 200 plus pieces of equipment that help keep the city running. So one of the larger projects is our ADA transition plan. That's all the handicap ramps that are all over the city. We currently have about 1,800. When we began the project, we have about 1,800 existing handicap ramps. About 1,400 of them have either been upgraded or compliant with the current standards. So we have about 400 left. We get about 40 a year, so we're looking at another 10 years before we believe that the federal government will probably change with their standards again, and we'll have to start all over again. But the current standards we're close to compliance there. Hard surface improvements that you see here for park system parking lots, and it helps upgrade some of the infrastructure and amenities in our well-used park system. I don't think anybody can argue that our parks aren't well used. I believe we have the top two, and Joe can remind me if the numbers have changed, but we're the top two used parks in the state, or top two used trails in the state, and that's the Hall and Pomeroy Trail. And we currently have a counter on the reservoir, and the numbers are pretty staggering there for how many folks utilize the reservoir on a daily basis. And there's a project, Preston's Playground, will be built hopefully in the next couple of months to probably increase the usage there at the reservoir. Oh, wrong one again. So our field operations complex is where we store all the equipment and materials we use. And therefore, we lack storage space to keep the expensive equipment out of the weather. Phase one of the project was to build a new salt shed, which allowed us to get through an entire winter without replacing our salt supply. Occasionally, when there is sustained cold weather and snow, we end up in a bidding war or fighting with someone else to get salt from the barge in Wilmington. This phase one allowed us to build a bigger salt shed so we can store more and utilize it throughout the year. Phase two will be to demolish a warehouse which is already partially collapsed. So it's useless to us now. It takes up parking spaces, and it doesn't allow us to put this equipment that at times can cost up to $300,000 to $400,000 for one vehicle. It doesn't allow us to put that inside a, to put it under cover. Once we find a power cord, I will turn over the presentation to Dave Del Grande. He'll give you a little presentation on why we're looking at debt. So I apologize for the technical delay here.
Good. All right, I'm bringing the juice. How you doing? I'm Dave Del Grande. I'm the Finance Director. Thank you all for coming tonight. So bottom line is, what got us here? Why are we doing this? And what's the reason? And what's our plan going forward? Over the past several years, as Tom and Tim have said, our water and sewer utility revenue has been solely based upon consumption. So if we've had an extra rainy season, our revenue numbers will tend to drop due to our consumption dropping off and our water sales dropping off. Water sales are tied directly to the sewer bill that you receive. When we move into, when we add that up over a 3-year period, if I told you we brought in 94% of our revenue, that doesn't sound too bad. That's an A on your report card. I'd be thrilled if my kids brought an A. But over a 3-year period, that's $3 million. And when we're losing that kind of money over a 3-year period, it makes it very difficult to raise and anticipate what we're going to be bringing in the future on a consistent basis to fund projects of this magnitude. So all these projects here, about a dozen that we have on this list, all have been in the works for many years, but ultimately kind of got scrapped due to the fact that we didn't have a consistent source of revenue to be able to fund it all the way through. So this debt service plan is buying the city time in order to reestablish our rates for water and sewer, so we can stabilize our ability to normalize what we expect to bring in. So if we're budgeting $9 million, we'll be bringing in $9 million. Going to the debt market, utilizing the state revolving loan program is an optimal way to handle that, because it's a low way to borrow money at a very reduced interest rate, since the program is funded federally, and that money and that savings passes along to us, who competitively bid along with other agencies in Delaware to bid for that stuff. So moving on to debt, it also provides an equitable means of sharing the cost amongst all those who are using our system. So the Rodney project itself has a 50-year life. It wouldn't be fair to you today and our businesses here today to be footing the bill of the full $9 million over the next 3 years, whereas we can go to the debt market and borrow that money for that, and you only pay an incremental portion of the Rodney project versus paying at one shot, versus paying it over, or paying it over a long period of time versus paying it at one shot in 3 years. So it has a very low impact on your wallet. So we have 3 options. There's a state revolving loan that we've been mentioning. There's bond financing, which is the normal way that many government agencies secure funding. And then the old bank loan that many of us use today. So going with the state revolving loan, the state revolving loan program is strictly to water type projects only. So we're talking water, sewer, and stormwater. And as I'd mentioned previously, low closing costs, low interest rates, and it's a competitive process, as I'd mentioned, with other Delaware agencies. So it means that it doesn't guarantee, if we apply for it, that we're going to get that money, because there's other agencies looking for the same dollar that we are. We're fortunate that the stormwater project was approved by the state at $9 million. Not that we're spending $9 million, but they gave us that ceiling in case we needed to borrow up to that much. And it was another feather in the city's cap that we got that approval without actually having a formal referendum process, because the state was so confident and felt that this project was so important that they gave us the approval prior to getting approval via referendum. So that money's on hold for us right now at 2%. Bond financing. Many of you hear about bond financing. It is using the city's creditworthiness, which is We're AA2 and a AA plus, which is the second and third highest with Moody's and Fitch Ratings, who are the rating agencies for all of us agencies. It is the most economical way aside from the state revolving loan, whereas the interest rate is generally much lower than you would going with the standard bank loan. But coupled with this, with the lower interest rate, you're paying higher fees because we have to go through the rating agencies again to get our credit rating reaffirmed. So our investors are buying our bonds at rates, and essentially what it's showing is that that we have a high ability to pay back these loans, and we wouldn't go into default. Just for reference purposes, when 2011 was here, when we went to the bond market for the reservoir, it cost about $110,000 in closing costs going through the rating agencies. The old standby is the bank loan. Bank loans generally have a little bit of a higher interest rate than the bond market, but to go against that higher interest rate is low cost. So we would no longer have to pay that $110,000 fee, but we would trade that fee for a higher interest rate. Depending on how much we would have to borrow, there's a trade-off for such. So we're looking at that option right now, and it depends upon what type of approvals we get from the state on the state revolving loan program. So this chart today represents what our current debt service looks like right now. In 2018 through 2022, we're paying between $2.7 and $2.4 million a year for our debt service payments. Of that total, about $1.4 million is related to the reservoir, and about another $1.2 million or so in that range is related to the smart meters. So everyone's home, every property has an automated meter on it that helps us calculate your electric and water consumption. On the chart, the majority of the debt is coming off the books in 2022. So we are scheduling our projects to time with that debt coming off so it wouldn't add a greater burden to the residents today. So our goal is to fill that void going beyond 2022, having a smaller impact in 20 and 21. Tim and Tom mentioned previously, this is a collective list of the state revolving loan projects that we are seeking from the state. We have notice of intents for all these projects, and we're waiting back on approvals for all of them. As I mentioned, the Rodney project has been already approved. So of the $23.4 million, $2.1 million will be used in 2018. 9.2 in 2019, 5.7 in 20, and it tails off in 21 to 2.5 and back up a bit in 2022. The start dates are on the left. Half of these are starting on July 1st, tentatively, depending on a successful referendum, and they all have various ending dates between 2020 and 2022. There's one in 19, it's the SCADA system. So these are all critical components to our existing infrastructure. The only item that's new is the Rodney project itself. The non-water projects are tagged for a bond or a loan, which total about $3 million. And these are all the items that Tim had discussed earlier. We're talking about street paving, parking lot paving, the master plan for our operations center, some reconstruction there, and truck lift systems and so forth. So we're using much smaller amounts, between $500,000 the rest of this year, and it goes to about $600,000 in 19 and 20. This is what our current debt looks like when you add on to it the state revolving loan and the bond that we've been discussing. The green area is our current debt level, and the blue is the new bond and the new state revolving loan. And then lastly, Rodney will be its own item on the referendum, is the orange reflected there above. So as you see, the green is at about $2.7 million in 2018. Will spike to about 3.5 going out to 2022. That's when the projects will be coming at completion. We'll tail off a little bit as our old debt comes off the books in 2023. And then going in the outward years, we're just above 2.5 million. And it tails off again in 2030 to about 1.8 million or so. So our goal was to stay at our current debt service level around 2.8. We got close there. Depending on how the projects are rolling out in the next 4 years, it'll play into where that little triangle in the orange there spikes up. Our goal was to get some of that down into the valley in 2023. If we were just to pay cash, which has been our standard method in the past, this is what our cash needs would look like in the immediate future, which is between 2018 and 2022. Again, the green is our current debt. The state revolving loan is blue, the bond is the light blue, and then the Rodney project is orange. And it would be extremely difficult for the city to ask council to approve an additional $27 million in revenue between today and 2021 from our current residents and businesses. So in order to do that, it would require some rate adjustments or revenue sources that we haven't had in the past. So this ultimately would definitely require a council to approve utility rate adjustments and tax increases. So what does it look like? All these colors are great, but what's this doing to my pocketbook? These two charts here, the top is the cash financing model, the bottom is the debt financing model. On 2019 and through 2022, for cash financing, it's all over the place. If you were just to pick one thing, say look at the dark blue box at the bottom of the first box, with no change in 18. But 2019, it would be a 12.7% increase in what you're paying to the city today if we use cash. In 2020, we would be asking for 2% more. In 2021, we would come back and drop the rates a collective 7.2%. And then 2022, they would come down again 6.2. And just want to put the big asterisk on this. This is only related to these debt issues. There's nothing else to do with the rest of the city operations and expenses and so forth. We're just sticking solely with this 27 million here that we're asking for. A little bit of normalcy is the debt financing portion. So if you go to the bottom of the slide, we're at 1%, 0.4%, 0.5%, and 0.8% changes year over year, 1920 through 22. So it's more predictable, it's easier to digest, it's less up and down, and ultimately we feel that this would be a method that our residents would be more acceptable with versus seeing double-digit increases followed by single-digit decreases and back and forth. All this information is available on the website, so if you want a copy, it's there. So we talked percentages. What about dollars and cents? I got that too. Thanks for asking. So if you look at what we have here on the top is the cash box, bottom is the debt. In 2018, the average city resident is paying the city about $276 a month for bills, which is water, sewer, taxes, and stormwater. Going with the cash model, your $276 a month will go up to $311, then it'll go to $317, drop down to $294, and then drop down to $276 and $22. So one year we're asking you for $35 more a month, and another time we're going to be asking you for $18 less a month. We would always like to ask you for less, but it's hard to do that after we always jumped you up to 35. Going to the bottom, you can see that it's a little more of an easily slope. You go from 276 to 279 to 280 to 281 to 283. So this is monthly. So we're talking $1 to $2 to $3 per month on average versus no change to $35 a month to $7 a month and a minus $23 a month and so on. So we're trying to develop some normalcy into our rate setting process. It has a less of a burden using debt service on our annual operating budget. It makes it easier for council to discuss with each of their constituents what we're doing and why we're doing it and what the reason of it is for. And it's ultimately, it's a cup of coffee. I spend about $1.70 a day at Wawa on the 24. I think I could use one right now. All right, I'll flip it back to Tom here on the process.
All right, thank you, Dave. So what's the process from here? In Newark, the referendum process is spelled out explicitly in section 407.2 of our charter. And in order to meet the charter requirements, we developed a timeline in front of you. On April 23rd, which was in the past, council set the resolution, which sets the public hearing for May 14th, where they'll actually finalize the questions. So right now, all the projects that are in front of you are proposed to be included in the referendum. The actual projects that are set and included will be fixed on May 14th. So if you want to come voice your opinion, tell your council people, do it before then, or come and speak on the 14th. Between the 29th and June 18th is a period of time where we have to do newspaper advertising and other public outreach efforts, but we're going to be doing it continuously anyway. June 19th will be the actual referendum date, and then the other dates are kind of administrative in nature. After that, assuming a positive result in this referendum, we'll work with council to proceed with securing financing for the different projects. Each project will have to come back to council for approval, both to lock in the financing and then again to award the contract when we do the bid process. So there'll be plenty of chances to take a bite at this apple if you like or don't like a project. If the referendum fails, we'll have to reconsider our capital budget and work with council to reprioritize and potentially raise additional revenue through tax and rate increases like what Dave said. We're going to be putting all this information up on the web. The web address there, newarkde.gov/vote, has everything referendum related. And then we've also set up an email address, asknewark@newark.de.us. If you have any questions about the referendum or really anything in general, that's why we set up the name so generic. Send it to that email address. We'll get it to the right person. We'll get you an answer back. So that's your one-stop shop for questions Newark related. We're going to be developing a frequently asked questions document. We got a bunch of questions at the last town hall. We're busy getting them answered in document form. That'll be up. We'll take any questions that are unique from tonight. We'll append them into that, and we'll get it up on the web as well. So now I'd like to open it up to questions. So our budget currently is around $86 million, and our current debt service is $2.5 million, $2.7 million. So 30 to 1-ish currently, something like that. So by charter, we're allowed to take, we have a debt ceiling, just like the federal government has a debt ceiling. So our debt ceiling is, well, I guess they had, I don't know if they have one anymore. So our debt ceiling is at 10% of the assessed value of the city's property. So the city's total assessment of all the properties dated back to 1983, which is the last, when they normalize all the assessments to the 1983 value. So the total value is around $870 million, something like that. So our debt ceiling through bonds specifically is around 1/10 of that, so $87 million currently. Technically, the state revolving loan fund projects, this is something that we've dug up since the last town hall, aren't called under that debt ceiling, so technically we could borrow more on the other side. I think it's a good guideline for us to shoot for, try and keep all of our debt under that 10%. That's the goal.
Okay, I have a few questions that are related. First of all, I'm assuming things like replacing pipes is going to be done one way or the other. Is this referendum primarily coming about because of the proposed stormwater project at the Rodney dorms? And if the referendum fails, is that project dead? And if that's true, what are the other options for that property?
Two very good questions. So the projects, like you said, most of these projects kind of have to happen one way or the other. So if the referendum fails, we're going to have to try and do them some other way. Especially the treatment plant projects, the current air stripper that we have, If you want to come up and take a look, it's over here. It is not in very good shape, and we actually have had to take wells offline because the concentrations in the water have gotten high enough that that system can't take it out anymore. So the new system that we'd be putting in would restore lost capacity and would replace the system. As far as Rodney, so right now we're proposing council have 3 questions on the referendum. Rodney will be its own question, so it can live or die on its own. And then all the water and sewer projects will be their own question. And then the general fund projects that would be looking at bond financing or loan financing will be their own. And let's say if Rodney fails, hopefully the other ones still go. But so we're currently under contract with the university to purchase the property. And our contract terms give us the ability to purchase that property whether or not we actually do anything with it. So the purchase price of the property of the $8+ million is $2.1 million, and then we can deduct $700,000 of our demolition costs off of that purchase price. So if we move forward with the project, it'll cost us $1.4 million because our demo cost is going to be much more than that $700,000. If we just buy the property and sit on it, it'll cost us $2.1 million, and we could technically purchase that over time. The contract gives us the ability to pay for it with $500,000 payments a year over a period of time. Now, if we did that, we'd be left with a building, all those buildings sitting there rotting. Eventually, we'd have to deal with the buildings or sell it off to someone else. But there is a possibility that we could still purchase it. We could look to raise revenue and raise it up, enough to pay off that $500,000 a year through the contract terms without borrowing. But realistically, getting that project done would take a lot of time. So we'd probably set up an account and save up money over years and then try and do it sometime in the future. We'd also be forfeiting the 2% interest rate that we've been able to lock in through the state. So
if the referendum fails then, and then the city buys the property, what happens to those buildings? How long do they sit there?
That's a good question. They sit there until we get enough money to knock them down. The demolition costs, and do you know what the demolition costs are off the top of your head?
I believe it was closer to $800,000 for just the demolition costs themselves. But it's a little difficult because the demolition will require reshaping the soil and things like that. So, and we also don't have a full handle on exactly how much material whether we can use the material in roads and things like that or sidewalks, or it actually has to get shipped off. So it is a moving number, but around $800,000.
And then there's also asbestos abatement, I think, is in addition to that, and some other hazardous materials, things like that.
So what happens then? I'm sorry to monopolize the time, but this is, I think,
No, it's fine.
what happens if the referendum fails, you don't do the stormwater, and you decide not to buy the property?
Okay, so
then what happens to it?
So
I'm related because I'm going to ask this eventually, and I wish there was somebody from the university here. And I'm saying this one as a proud blue head. Given all of the tax-exempt property that the university's had for decades, why don't they just give the land to Newark? Why do they have to make us buy it? And are they going to knock the buildings down if Newark does nothing with it? Because I'm tired of having something that looks like a prison sitting right outside of my development. And what's the university's responsibility for that stuff if I don't think Newark's going to do anything with Dickinson? The university's got some plans for that. What are they going to do with this if Newark decides they can't do anything? So those are all of my questions.
Okay.
And I wanted to get them all out because I think they're all related.
absolutely. So I can give you some insight. So the Dickinson property went on the market, and they are negotiating with a potential buyer. We've heard rumors that the sale price of the Dickinson property is $8 million or more as is. So they'd be buying it for that and then having to demo the buildings and reset the site back to level ground before they can build something new there. So that they're selling it to us for $1.4 million. We got a really good discount on it because I think Rodney was the more valuable property. I can assure you we asked if they'd give it to us a few times and they wouldn't, but they gave us a pretty good deal. If we decide not to buy the property and we just, it's not for us, the current underlying zoning is RM, which is garden apartments, 16 units per acre garden apartments. So in theory, you could fit around 110, 112 townhouse-style apartments or garden apartments in there under the current underlying zoning. Now, apartments require a special use permit, so it's not exactly by right, but they would have a pretty good argument to take to council that would be hard to say no to based off court cases and things like that. So it would more than likely be a residential development with more than likely students in it.
Who would build those? University?
No, the university would, they would sell it off
They would
almost
sell
certainly.
off like for someone else.
Yeah, yeah.
So even if this project didn't go through, this one, we still have the issue of the stormwater problems in that immediate area. And per our estimations, this is the most cost-effective way to handle this issue by buying this parcel and putting the stormwater facility on this parcel. Otherwise, we would be looking at purchasing individual tracts of land, which would far exceed the $8 million that we're looking at for this project. Not to mention, it would probably take us 2 to 3 decades to accumulate that many pieces of property as they become available without going through eminent domain.
Yeah, if we want to deal with the flooding problem, there's basically 2 ways you can do it. You can either put in bigger pipes, or you can detain the water upstream and get it out of the pipe and let the areas that are flooding drain before that water comes down. So for us, it's going to be more cost effective to do that exactly with Rodney. Basically take the flooding from the streets and move it into a pond where it doesn't damage anything. So we have some areas of Newark, Devon, the Bins, District 3 really, that flood pretty heavily, much worse than I would have believed. When Tim and I had a gentleman come into our office who said the water was up to the side view mirror on his truck. I'm like, And then he brought us pictures of the water up to the side view mirror on his truck. So we believed him. And so this pond would be around here. The pipe that it runs through kind of runs through the old Newark area. It's a kind of an underground stream that's been piped. And then this area ties into that same system. So by holding the water back here, we can add bigger pipes here. Because if we don't have this and we just put bigger pipes in, this neighborhood down here already floods too. So if we put big pipes in and get the water out of here, it's just going to flood these people worse. So we can't put in bigger pipes and really start to tackle the flooding in Devon and the Bins unless we do something to hold water back somewhere else. So that's what we're proposing here.
So what you're saying is if this water pond doesn't go through, and the city does one of the other 2 things, either buys it and tears the buildings down, or lets the university sell it to somebody, you're still going to have the flooding problems. The only thing that will solve the flooding problem is the pond.
Yes, more or less, yeah. So, in theory, I guess technically we could see if UD would sell us some land down on Star Campus, but we're going to be in the same situation. They're not going to want to gift it to us. They're going to want to sell it to us, and we're right back where we were. This is a pretty ideal situation. It takes about 70 acres of drainage from Oakland and Nottingham that doesn't have any stormwater management currently. So it's, water runs off the streets, goes in, it's got all the pollutants, it's got the extra volume. We'll be able to treat it, get some educational credits for our NPDES permit with the EPA. So we're mandated to do certain things through our permit from having a storm sewer system. One of them is education. Our future permit will likely require us to do some treatment for pollutant removal. This will help us get credits towards that. To us, it seems like a win-win. As soon as we found out the property was going up for sale, I think Tim and I were racing down the hall to the city manager at the time, trying to get on the phone with the university to get them to start talking to us about selling it.
And one of the good things about this project is nobody's exempt from paying a stormwater utility.
Yeah.
So UD pays about $500,000 a year right now on our current stormwater utility rates.
Out of 1.4 million.
Correct. So they're about 30–40% of the total. So they'll be buying back this project, paying 30–40% of that over the next 30–year period, however long we pay this debt off.
Yeah.
So it's really a win-win for the residents and small businesses here, because ultimately UD is paying, and the commercial properties, the car dealerships, those with a lot of impervious area that previously were not paying anything into stormwater costs, are now footing the lion's share of this cost, which they should be, because that's the fair way to do it.
If the referendum fails again, what would happen to the water main replacement?
So currently in the 2018 budget, there are $0 of real city money for water main replacement. So if it fails, the project's not going to happen this year, realistically, unless we can only do tax increases with the budget approval process. We can do rate increases mid-year, but if we did a rate increase mid-year, that revenue, we wouldn't actually realize it for several months as it builds up. So realistically, the projects that are currently slated would roll into later years, unfortunately.
And I have one more question. You had a slide that was going, something about federal grants for some of our infrastructure. Can you explain that again?
Yeah, so back in probably the 70s specifically, that's good.
There you go.
So the federal government used to give out a lot more grants than they do now. They still do for some transportation projects. So for example, the speaker is going to give me feedback. The new bridge that's proposed over the White Clay Creek pedestrian bridge is going with one of these 4-to-1 match grants for transportation alternatives. So get you out of a car, get you on your feet, get you on a bike. So some of our historic projects were done with federal grant money as well. We put in some new sewer lines, new water mains, things like that came with a lot of federal money back in Jimmy Carter's time.
But we don't get that anymore.
Those programs aren't around anymore. So it was kind of like the stimulus where they were a one-time thing that came through and now they're gone.
But the one thing with the state revolving loan program, being a member of that program, since we're paying interest on this debt, the state takes that interest and puts it back into grant opportunities. So now we're open up for more grant opportunities that we didn't have an opportunity for before. So we're in the process of that as well.
Yeah.
And we have already taken advantage of a lot of grant programs, mainly on the Rodney project. The state has footed the bill for, the state or federal funds have footed the bill for a majority of the work that we've already done in planning the referendum and planning what you see there in the public outreach that we've already undertaken to come up with the plan that you see in front of you, as well as planning grants that we receive as part of the state revolving loan fund for both our sewer and water projects. But we have taken advantage of our share of grants through the state, and I believe we were somewhere in the $1 million range just recently.
Yeah, it's probably around $1 million in grants since 2014 to build. So back in 2014, our water and sewer maps were literally hand drawn, and they were on a wall. That was my old office. And when we changed offices, the new IT manager moved into my old office, and I kept telling him, I was like, I got to get my maps out of here, and he thought I was joking. And then one day I came in, I was like, all right, time to move. And he's like, no, wait, you're serious? That's your map? So we got a bunch of grants, and we got them in a GIS system, which is basically a big database, and we can track all this, and that's how we get this great information. So looking at a big Excel spreadsheet, you can't tell anything, but when you throw it up on a map, boom, everything starts to pop out, and you can log data. We're doing inspections in the field now, entering the data directly into a computer, and it automatically updates our database. So we get good data, and we can do good analysis and planning now, which we couldn't do before. One thing that I failed to mention, so if we're able to access the State Revolving Loan Fund, it opens up a whole nother realm of grants and opportunities through the SRF program. So they have an asset management program grant so our interest rate on the Rodney loan, for example, is 2%. We can get, if we apply and are approved for that, up to half of that back, the interest payment back, to do an asset management program that will then create a pipeline of projects to utilize the State Revolving Loan Fund. In addition to that, there's low-income subsidization that is available through the SRF program, up to $200,000 per utility. So if we take out a loan in the water fund, we'll have access to up to $200,000 a year in grant funding to help offset costs for low-income customers. If we get into the sewer system, another $200,000 is available. Stormwater system, more money is available. So these programs aren't available to us now, but once we get in, they are. And that's a concern that we have is per the EPA standards, the city's rates for utilities are already unaffordable. So they're above a certain threshold of percentage of the median income or the poverty line. I can't remember exactly off the top right now. So our rates are already technically unaffordable, and that also opens us up to better rates, and they actually do loan forgiveness on some of these loans, depending on your rates and how critical the project is. Sometimes they'll just say, okay, it was a $2 million project, we're going to wipe off some of the cost of that project, and you only owe us 1.8 million instead of 2 million. There are grants, so in the clean water program, which is sanitary sewer, if we have a sanitary sewer project that's $2 or $3 million, and they will allow us to tack on a green project, a stormwater project or something like that, that's a certain percentage of that. I don't have the number off the top of my head, so we'll just say 10%. So another $300,000 worth of a green project, and then they'll actually adjust the interest rate down so that it doesn't impact the total amount that we pay back. So that's essentially free money. So we actually almost got a 0% loan for Rodney through that program, because the city of Rehoboth had this big project, their ocean outfall project. It was $30 million or some huge number. And they, during their referendum, only got borrowing for basically exactly what they needed. So the state offered them that 0% loan, and they had no more borrowing authorization, so they couldn't take advantage of that 0% loan. So the state offered it up statewide in a competitive process, and unfortunately came in second. We almost got it. But 2% is not bad. So, but those sorts of programs become available to us.
So if there is no health hazard to drinking orange water, then what are we drinking?
Rust.
So technically, yeah, the orange water is rust. So it's iron. I don't know where, yeah, here's our bottle. This is our exhibit from earlier today in the Oaklands. We were doing system maintenance testing. Yeah, this is actually an employee of the city. So it is just rust. It's rust from the inside of the pipe. If you come over and take a look at the pipe there, it's got the rust inside. And you get these crevices, and the iron will oxidize. A lot of that iron is actually in the pipes, either from the pipe itself or from before we had the Southwell field iron removal plant, which is on one of the slides. So we used to pump a lot of iron and manganese into the system. Manganese comes out like black in the water, and iron is that orange color, and it precipitates out, and it gets stuck in those crevices of the rust and the unlined pipes. And then when you have a disturbance, like a fire hydrant opens, or someone runs a fire flow test in their sprinkler system in the building, it'll disturb it, and it gets up suspended. Like I shook that up, and now it's up in the water column. But generally, if it's steady state and we're domestic demand, it stays on the bottom and it doesn't really get up in suspension. Some of the worst areas of the city do have more persistent orange water, discolored water, and generally you can just filter it out with a standard house filter until we can get in to either replace the line, or if it's an old main that has nice thick pipe walls. We've done some where we take scrapers and we drag scrapers back and forth through the pipe, scrape it clean, and then apply a cement mortar lining to the inside. And there's some other technologies like that where you can rehab it in place. But unfortunately, drinking water drives some of our replacement. We just did some main replacement on Park Place that was specifically due to the water quality issues. We did Main Street back in 2004, 2005, did a cement mortar lining project on Main Street because of the same issues.
Does the city have any Flint, Michigan lead pipe?
We do not have any known lead. Now, there is lead in the system in some people's houses, certainly. We have a lead program in place, kind of what they didn't have in Flint when they switched to the Flint River. So we do annual testing. We add corrosion inhibitors, polyphosphates to the water that it's a sequestering agent, builds like a film over the lead to make it not leach. We do pH adjustment to make sure the water's not corrosive, acidic. And it's a good program. So after Flint, we actually brought a corrosion specialist in to review our program specifically to make sure that we were comfortable with what we were doing, and we passed with flying colors, and he was very happy.
And in 2014, the federal government passed a low lead standard for fixtures and things like in homes, and all our water meters and things have to be certified low lead as part of. And so what we did is we cleared stock from previous prior to 2014 and purchased all new stock so that there's no overlap.
Yeah, we did that. The legislation was passed several years before the implementation date of 2014, so we actually stopped using any not certified low lead brass a few years prior, maybe a year or two prior. But if you have copper pipe and your house is 30 years old, the solder is probably leaded solder. But we do our best to make sure, it's the obligation of the water utility to make sure that the water is safe from our treatment plant until it comes out of your tap, even though most of the lead is in pipes owned by the residents. So that's why we have a very aggressive corrosion control program and lead and copper sampling program.
And we do that sampling on occasion, so if anyone here would like to have it tested, there's a specific protocol. You can actually send the email to the Ask Newark email address and say, I'm willing to have my home tested for lead when you do the next round of testing. We'll certainly, we like to go, we have to target certain areas because of certain ages of homes, and we like to get to those areas and set you up with a test, and then we give you the results, and then provide the results to the state and the EPA.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have a question about the state revolving funds, and my question is, if I understood correctly, it sounded like you were approved for state revolving loans for that 2019 or 2018? And, well, that's
Okay.
just part of my
Okay.
So it seemed like maybe you had done that with some ease, and that the plan is talking about maybe $23 million in the next 4 or 5 years. And so did the projections on how much it will cost us annually, if we, like it was $2 with the debt plan, it was $2 for 1 year and then $1 for the following, so it kind of stacks up one on top of the other, but that is planning to get those state revolving loans each year. So what's the probability that we'll get those revolving loans annually? We have it for this coming year, but will we get it in the next 4 years?
That's a very good question. So each of these SRF projects will be an independent loan application. So right now we've submitted, it's called a notice of intent, and it's an outline of the project, and it goes into the basically the stack of projects that DENREC and Department of Health have. DENREC does sewer and stormwater, and DHSS does drinking water. So they take those projects and they rank and prioritize them, and then they make a recommendation to the Water Infrastructure Advisory Council, which is an appointed body by the governor, I think, who reviews each of the projects, and they're technical, and they'll make a recommendation as to whether or not they want to approve each one. So we've taken Rodney through that process all the way through, and it was approved. The rest of these projects will have to go on realistically either the first year when they're funded or the year prior. So there may be a year when we don't have to go because we've gone before, but if a project isn't approved in the first year that it's reviewed, it actually gets a higher ranking the next year because it's been in the program for more than 1 year. So the referendum authorizes us, it gives us borrowing authority, so we can take advantage of the borrowing. It actually doesn't, I don't believe it has an end date on the authorization, so it'll be specific to these projects, to the capital program that was in the 2018 budget. And it basically gives council the authority that, say we don't get it the first year, but we get it the second year or the third year, we can push some of these projects off. I feel pretty confident that these are all quality projects, but there's always a chance, there's only so many dollars, so the EPA gives capitalization grants into the fund each year of around $10 million for Delaware for each of the water, sewer, and stormwater. And then that money gets divvied up, it gets thrown into an account, so they probably have some from previous years in any given year. And then you competitively fight over that money, and the debt service payments that are coming in from existing loans will replenish it in addition to those capitalization grants annually. So if a big project like another Rehoboth Ocean outfall comes through, it could suck all the air out of the room. But I'm not aware of any real big projects like that. And the EPA, I think, just announced an additional $300 million. It's going to be going into capitalization grants. So if you go by population, that'd be another $1 million for water and sewer for Delaware. So I feel pretty good that we'll, I don't want to guarantee we'll get them the first year, but I feel pretty confident that they'll all get authorized eventually. But
So just to clarify, if I understand correctly then, just to clarify, then what the referendum would be asking for is $23 million with no end date, and you'll just apply for it annually. Am I understanding that accurately?
It's 23.7 million for the state revolving loan projects, and then another 3 million for the non-water related projects, so about 27
just
million or so.
over, yeah. And then the questions haven't been finalized yet, and the wording of the questions will put limitations on exactly what's in it. Currently, what we've proposed is for projects identified in the 2018 capital improvement program budget. So it gives council some flexibility that, let's say the Rodney project ends up coming in under budget, because these are budgetary numbers that we've set, that let's say instead of 8.1 million, it ends up being 6 million, we've got $2 million left over. Council has the authority, the ability, with the more flexible wording, to use that money to maybe offset the cost of a different project that ended up being more expensive. So they can move it around, but they can only move it around in the projects that are in the 20.
Correct.
Technically, the wording is 2018 CIP, so it could be there are a handful of other projects, but we're going to be cash financing this.
So to clarify that then, the 2018 CIP runs out 5 years?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
So I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank the staff for doing a great job. I think they deserve a round of applause.
Thank you.
You guys also deserve a round of applause for hanging in. I know some of
Thank
this
you.
is a little dry, but there are more of these planned, and the dates are available at the website at that /vote. So if you have neighbors who have questions, make sure you let them know that there's an opportunity to attend one of these forums and get the questions answered. So I would like to thank everyone for coming out, and have a good evening.